Hello and welcome to Dice Punks, a tabletop role-playing podcast where we focus on playing full campaigns in less well-known systems. This week, the Frontispiece Four and friends try to keep at least one step ahead of the dragnet they're pretty sure is slowly closing around them. Hello and welcome. I'm Adam, your friendly neighborhood game master, and joining me are...
Hi, I'm Drew, and I'll be playing Cato, aka Hecate, bringer of books, crimes, and occasional book crimes.
Hi, I'm Robin, and I'll be playing Callisto Armitage, but that's officer to you unless your name is Den. You can call them Cal.
Hi, I'm Dez, and I will be playing the OPSEC gremlin, whose only name is Luke or Byrne.
Hello, my name is Nick, and I will be playing Ing, a droid operator. Drone operator. He is a droid. I liked him, so I put an Ing on him. You can vote me off the island with an appropriately high Patreon tier.
I had to do a little dance.
Yeah. Let the record show, for those who were only on audio, that Robin was doing the single ladies dance.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody. Let's get right into our recap of last time, courtesy this time of Cato.
Another successful job. A socialite threatened. A baby more or less undisturbed as a cat screams at it across languages, across species. Things are fine at home, in other words. Ing and I told the group about Apatia, the augmented not-a-nun who we'd both run into multiple times and who said she'd met a dreamer. So, amid the debrief from the mission, we decided to meet up with her and learn more. And we did meet up at the Place of Honor, a sort of nuclear disaster being imminent themed bar with good tunes courtesy of the Fruits of Knowledge and some assertive drinks courtesy of a barkeep named Mediocritus. Don't be so hard on yourself, guy. We told Apatia about Over3, guarded, but only just, and she told us about her own past. Apatia, it seems, is some kind of ex-evangelical cult escapee, once and maybe future god-botherer. Somewhere along the line, she had something inexplicable happen to her, something that left her with multiple cranial augments and no memory of her parents' fate, and a vague but unshakable sense that she'd met a dreamer. The worm. Polysom. Other dreamers that may or may not exist. Purely digital dreamers, maybe? Police dog bots with tentacular faces, possibly? Who knows? Each of those may exist, assuming dreamers are discrete from one another and assuming that we can somewhat trust a memory defined mostly by being full of gaps and assuming any number of other things. None of those named or hypothesized or mythologized ones are the one that Apatia met, though. Probably. The show was good. The night felt alive. We don't know much still, but I feel like we understand what we don't know much better than before. And we're starting to trust Apatia, and she's starting to trust us, and this worries me if I'm honest. We're trusting each other more and more. So, here we go.
Thank you. And if I may begin with a compliment, we've had some real killer recaps lately, this, of course, being one. But also just, Drew, you're really good at compressing these things while keeping them intelligible. I'm always very impressed by your
thank you.
Ability to kind of like encapsulate things.
That augment is paying for itself.
We do pick up, in a sense, right where that recap leaves off, but also it left off at the end of a night. Byrne had already headed out, right after you all finished talking to Apatia. Everybody else stayed for the show, maybe even a little after if you were finishing a drink or something, but eventually the night winds down. And this can lead us to a variety of places. There is nothing pressing on your schedule as Monday night winds to a close. So, the calendar is your oyster, so to speak. What is it that we want to get up to? I am assuming in all of this that most people will be like going to get some rest after leaving the place of honor. But if you had a different idea for Monday night, you can let me know. Otherwise, we can take it in a slightly zoomed out way to, decide and describe what it is that we're doing Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, just what our plans going forward are, what our priorities are.
Step 1 for Monday night still. Has K&B responded to me?
That, thank you for asking, is, let's see, assuming you're keeping hacker time, then you'll hear back from K&B once it's no longer Monday, but before most people are awake on Tuesday.
The instant I hear back from her, I request a meet.
Okay.
Digitally, that is.
Okay, that was going to be my clarifying question. So, yeah, you had, for our listeners, contacted K&B immediately after the Rutech job and sort of had a conversation, but then you had followed up via just like a, email or, text format, letting K&B know that you had received one of the Canopus.drs invites. Do you remember, had you told her about attending the soiree?
I had not.
Okay. I thought as much, but I wanted to be sure. She was also working on getting a sort of search assistant program shipshape for you. So all that as context, when you hear back from K&B, she has sent you a brief email that says, "No way. Are you going to go? When are you free?" And so you respond requesting a digital meetup, and she is like, "Yeah, sure," and goes to get like a little, you want to do it voice, want to do it like VR chat? What are you thinking?
Oh, VR.
Okay. So, she gets her little space that you met in last time, booted up, and sends you an invite. In short order, you are loaded in with your what if Clippy was a match VR chat avatar. For our listeners, it's not called VR chat in universe. I haven't settled on a name for it, but it is essentially the kind of thing that VR chat is. And so you are very shortly in this space able to chat, directly and expressively with K&B, who is quite literally perched on the edge of her seat in her avatar form, in her little meet space. I should say meeting space. Meet space has a different, different connotation. In her little meeting space, perched on the edge of her seat, and as soon as you are
in her digital sitting room,
fully initialized, she's, so you got an invite. That's exciting.
And I have been. And how would you like to join a conspiracy?
She blinks a few times, rapidly enough that her avatar sort of like glitches around it a little bit, and goes, "Well, I mean, I do like a conspiracy. What, oh, you have to tell me all about it. Come on."
So, you've read the files, basically.
I've looked over them, yeah.
Canopus was survived, yes?
Yeah?
What's the first syllable of the names?
She nods, sort of shaking her head. She goes, "Cryptographic puzzle, that is not."
No, not subtle, but backed by very good intelligence gathering.
Oh, the plot thickens.
That part will remain unspelled out because Hahi's gesture of good faith was destroying that data that should already have been well and thoroughly destroyed.
Hmm.
But it was bait enough to overcome my usual approach to things.
So, her body language suggests that she is perusing information, in sort of like another prompt or window. She says, so Hahi is Haru hear you? Well, she's done a really good job of constructing a persona, I suppose. What does she want?
To know what actually happened to her father, presumably at the hands of the cartels.
Okay. That makes sense. It's not as specific as I guess I was hoping it would be, conspiracy and all, but reasonable. And if it's useful for harming the cartel, then well.
That was part of why I figured you might be intrigued.
Yeah, she sort of steeples her fingers and drums them together excitedly.
This may relate to other things that are happening, but I have not yet pinned down enough on that all. Out of character, Adam, did Canopus have anything to do with like the sort of advanced AI and or roboticism that might lead to Dreamers?
The robotics side of it's certainly plausible. His career as a physicist, you're not entirely sure that you are knowledgeable enough in those fields to
appreciate
see a connection. Yeah. But the robotics would be a pretty direct connection.
Okay.
If indeed one was there.
This may also tie in urban legends, but we'll burn those bridges if and when we get there.
She sort of bounces in her seat and says, "Ooh, this is fun. Oh, I just got out of trouble, but this is kind of irresistible." Well, thank you for letting me know. I'm almost done with that program, and I think that I'm going to run its kind of beta
Maiden
test.
voyage.
Trying to find a little more information on Canopus Hear You and his work on the station. I'll be in touch both with that info and the search program once it's debugged.
Lovely.
And hey, keep me in the loop. This is a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
She stands on her chair and gives you a sweeping bow, and then somewhat unceremoniously disconnects.
Sounds good.
Mm-hmm. Assuming that nobody else had anything pressing enough to be handled on Monday night after the place of honor.
I certainly give Bronwy a quick summary, since we're trying to prove that we're no longer leaving her out of stuff that the group knows. So presumably over a lot of prolixity. I explain, I give the basics of, where we met, who Apatia is, and how we think that Over3 might be part of a larger family of things.
She looks both excited and uncertain, maybe understating it a little bit. She kind of gives Over3 a very uncertain look, and she's like, this is all really interesting, but it is also really scary.
Yeah, it's definitely both. I mean, it means we have no way of knowing who might be looking for us, or, what might be looking for us. If our uninvited guests come directly from the Dreamers, or the one brings the other, then it may not just be humans we have to worry about.
She nods and looks thoughtful. She says, so at a minimum, then, we're talking about PSS, IMX, probably the Dreamers, and maybe at least at one remove, all are part of the cartel looking for this thing.
And the Terabyte Boys, not that I'm too concerned about that. Also, maybe non-human intelligences. Yeah, that pretty much sums it up.
I think, then, that it's a reasonable supposition that one or more of those is going to find it eventually, and it would be good for us if it wasn't here when they did.
You make a good point, though I must say I don't know where else to take it.
She looks thoughtfully at it. She goes, yeah. Well, if I think of any genius alternatives, I'll let you know. But you can't help but feeling that, well, we've been lucky so far.
Yeah, that's a solidly dangerous attitude. The optimal outcome would be to get this thing on our side. I mean, now that's a motley crew, but, probably shouldn't hold my breath.
How exactly do you respirate?
Oh, it's complicated. There's some organic parts. Wait, that was not a serious question, was it? Or was it? If it was, I can actually show you a diagram.
She kind of
designed it myself.
Hesitates for a moment and goes, "Is an idle thought. I am curious, but maybe later when we're not being hunted."
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. The short answer is most of the parts work most of the time.
She chuckles. It's a fairly good summary of organic life, I suppose.
That's true. I can't claim that I've necessarily improved. I've just made things stranger.
Well, that's an improvement by certain metrics.
I grin.
Bronwyn smiles, and Prolix makes a kind of series of murbling sounds that get translated into a sequence of surprisingly specific civil engineering jargon.
Are you sure that that's random? It isn't randomized. We just can't tell the cipher anyway. I have a sudden urge to read about bridges back on Earth.
She sort of chuckles. She says, I had to force myself to stop thinking about it because, if you're around it for most of the day, it gives you too many bookmarks on wikis to really follow up in any reasonable amount of time.
I give her the abyss gaze is also sort of a look of acknowledgement. Let the subject drop.
Yeah. If you are, kind of satisfied with the on-screen portions of your conversation with Bronwyn, then we can assume that you chit-chat a little longer and then, figure out shifts, for watching and sleeping and taking care of the baby. Cal headed to bed, or anything in particular Monday night?
Cal would take cues from Ing on this, considering that they hung out and saw the show just to keep an eye on things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, Ing would be open to conversation if one naturally happens, but basically, comes home, pretty normal sleep routine, insofar as uses electrical stimulation to give his arm some exercise, sprinkles some nutrients into the substrate gravel, gives it a gentle massage, and then goes on to the defrag routine.
You're pleased with this arm's skin clearing up around the base. Looks like it's thriving.
Good.
As is roomy tradition, while Inga's caring for the hand, I clean my gun.
No skin conditions on that.
Good. Oh, thank goodness.
That would be concerning and alarming to everyone involved.
Indeed. We eventually arrive at Tuesday morning. Now, I'm going to let you guys know what I've got cooking. We already talked about the program that K&B is going to send to Byrne when it's done. Byrne is also expecting, not necessarily super soon, but sometime to hear from Allie, having kind of suggested sharing some, programs and practices and things, and gotten a tentative, maybe the better word there, agreement from Allie. Cato had also put feelers out about some cyberware, but we haven't really had time for you to actually do the acquisition part of that just yet. And then I know that both Cal and Byrne have sort of ongoing data sifting on a burner, so to speak. That occasionally, gets visited and periodically divulges useful information when collated. Is there anything that is on a burner that I have missed?
I think now that the whole dreamer thing and also Canopus has really come to the fore, Cal is going, or I'm going to rekindle my investigation into Caleb Dryden.
Mm-hmm.
Since, they seem connected to both of those threads of intrigue. And I know I have addresses, so I'll likely invite the gang to investigate the addresses with me.
Okay. In terms of the not as much boots on the ground part of that investigation, are you continuing to steer clear of PSS resources that would leave an inquiry log?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, especially for these two subjects.
Sure. That does make it go slower, but is probably prudent. Good deal. Other things that we are nominating for time spent in the next few days.
I'll also be working during that time, keeping appearances.
Yeah, as will Cato particularly.
Mm-hmm.
Having a shop to run and all. Can't be out to lunch all the time.
No.
I may also pull up the case just to see what PSS has on record. Since it was broadcasted, I feel fine leaving a little bit of a trail there with Lulu, and see if there's any description of the object. They're obviously not treating it they're not proceeding like it's a robbery, but I'm curious to see how it is being presented in PSS records.
That is the sound of me making a little bit of a randomizer roll. Okay. That one is fairly easy then to sort of characterize, because the records on Lulu's case are very sparse, even by PSS's sometimes very matter-of-fact standards for police work. It is quite thin. And moreover, nothing has gone into the filing, either hard copy or digital, in a way that leaves a revision history or updated or altered. They were pretty careful only to commit to writing the things that they wanted on the record about it, which are that Lulu was attacked at this place at this time, and that she said there were 3 assailants. That's pretty much it. Whatever else she might have told them, have been quite careful not to include it in their records.
I'm going to use their database to see if there was any other filings of Lulu, or records of Lulu and their database. Both charges against her, traffic infractions, just casting a wide net to see if the name pops up elsewhere.
I don't think it does. I think this is the only time she's in PSS records. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, that's all I'm going to search on their database.
Totally reasonable.
I don't want to hog too much investigation too, but I'll eventually do a search on Byrne again.
Good.
I think they would expect no less, to be honest.
Oh, just structure this in roughly roll call order, minus Cal, since we already know what they're up to. Cato.
I think if only for flavor, we talked about leveling and character growth last time, but I think this is the time when I actually do the stuff that allows me, narratively to do the stuff that we've said I can do mechanically. So, we've said that I can sort of share my, my group prep with the group. So, let's say I sort of take a look at our communication channels and clean things up. Let's say that, because I have some ability to help people with security levels or stealth risks, I, clean the OGs and make sure everything is working correctly. As I'm, just sweeping the shop, I also sweep the shop, do the kind of stuff that Byrne would be proud of.
that actually gives me a good opportunity for you to roll a cool plus criminal underworld, so 2d6 plus 3 to acquire some things, mostly
I like
for
it.
Ing.
That is 7 plus 3, we said?
Mm-hmm.
Is 10.
Okay. So this, is going to be played a little bit fast and loose with, because it is mostly about like character advancement. But you had previously been looking for some augments using some of the cash that was burning a hole in your pocket, and we can, if this is okay with you, Nick, sort of fiat that at some point communication in this next little bit takes place between you and Kato about what you might need for your surveillance equipment that you were getting from character advancement. This, of course, then also, as Drew had mentioned, is part and parcel with Kato's license character advancement, because the surveillance equipment is very illegal for private citizens. But it'll, as a background process here, the overall effect would be that Kato, you zero out your cash. You'd already spent some on the augment stuff. We're gonna take your other cash away for the bits and pieces that Ing needs. But then at the end of the day, you are able to source what you need, and by the next time we are doing mission stuff, you will have acquired the equipment for Ing's surveillance module, and I believe it was on mic before, but in case it wasn't, the thing that you were looking for in terms of augments was one of the sort of stomach modules usable by androids to present to Ing, so that he could participate in the next time I railroad you all to an eatery or a cafe.
Indeed. That's awesome that that's all going well. I think as I'm making the contacts where I do that, the next seed I plant, and expecting nothing to happen right away, is as per my conversation with Bronwyn, I start making overtures about a potential safe house for the baby. I'm subtle about it. I obviously don't mention what it is we're looking to hide, but I contact a few relatively trusted contacts and start seeing if they have space.
It is slow going, but you have started.
Fair enough. The right time to plant a fruit tree was 10 years ago.
Indeed. Let's see. Byrne, other than awaiting information from K&B and Allie, what are you using your time for?
I mean, I'm a bit of a hacker for hire, but if nothing else comes of that, then my downtime is spent helping secure further, better, always, never enough, the frontispiece, and also following up on research related to the good ? Officer.
Okay. We'll get to those mirrored investigations in a moment. For now, if I could get you to make a roll for me of cool plus... Actually, this is going to be a fun one. Cool plus queer communities. So that'll be a total of plus 2d6 plus 2.
That is a 10 on the dice, so 12.
Okay. You do find some work in your hacker for hire mode that pays more in, kind of goodwill and favors. You do get some currency out of it, but it is more pocket money than measured in cash. You'll be able to afford like more donuts and energy drinks. But it is essentially folks reaching out to you to try to counteract or clean up some of the surveillance of GPOL and adjacent queer communities that various security agencies and corporate surveillance interests have been doing. Light by your standards of disrupting surveillance networks or compromising data banks. Keeps you sharp, earns you a little bit of cred and a little bit of credits. We'll, like I said, get to the other rules in just a moment. Ing, what's your work week look like?
Other than putting together the surveillance, passive surveillance package, if and when that becomes available, I think I'm diving more into the Android rights movement, interested in what needs to be done, what's going on, and not least of all, kind of learning new ways to think and deprogramming myself, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Insofar as success in a thing like this can be measured in a role, do give me a cool plus Android rights movement roll that is, I believe, going to be a total of +5, 2d6 + 5.
Okay. Dropped one of the die. That is a 9 + 5. 14.
A 14. Very respectable. So most of this is taking place in online spaces, during the work week, which isn't to say that you never speak directly to somebody, either digitally or physically, but it is more of like sort of you getting oriented in what the station's particular Android rights, landscape is. And so you learn a lot. I will give a couple points here, but it'll also just be the sort of thing that you can roll to know something about in the future. There are a couple of different schools of thought that weren't wholly alien to you. There are those who sort of favor the path of, well, we just have to demonstrate that we're human enough to join human society fully. This is not an unpopular position, but it has a lot of vociferous critics, not without reason. Another is, that this is basically like intersectional civil rights issue, and that alliances with organic civil rights causes are not only possible, but very reasonable and desirable. This is sort of the inverse. It is a somewhat less popular position, but not one that people have quite so many problems with. It just seems like a lot of androids on the station have reservations about taking the approach. A very polarizing attitude is seen as fairly radical, but not as unpopular as you might have guessed, or as you would find on Earth. Is essentially an Android separatist movement, which has a smaller group of Android supremacists in it. That there are insurmountable obstacles to being able to integrate into human society, maybe insurmountable obstacles to being able to coexist with humans. And this can bleed very easily into, we are the next and best way of being, and that, the humans should feel lucky that we tolerate them at all. Mm-hmm. There are, of course, a lot of different shades in between these, and probably the plurality of androids are much more what you might call issues focused than ideological. What particular experiences have they had that they would like to see addressed or remedied, and they sort of focus on those things. One thing that seems to be true across the board is that nobody has the patience that they did even 3 years ago. That with Unity and Power this past cycle, things have been getting more tense, have been getting less tolerable, and the seams are starting to give. So there are a lot of androids who have taken up direct action, participating in demonstrations or protests for the first time in the last few years, which sometimes does go hand in hand with the sort of more radical positions. That's kind of the overview. And again, you do make some contacts, mostly again digitally, and those can come into play as necessary. If it comes up, I will say that you do note that your particular sort of interest in and fascination with spirituality is not unheard of, but it is not super common, and it seems to make a fair few people in the Android rights spaces kind of uncomfortable. Not necessarily outright hostility, but sort of uncertainty and discomfiture.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's useful, and just so that not all of my processing is internal as Ing's would be, I think that this is something that Ing is taking in, understanding. Unfortunately, as an android in general, he's used to being apart and not really feeling comfortable in other people's presence, and vice versa. Like there's not outright hostility, but not comfort either. And so it's unfortunate but not unfamiliar to also have that with other androids for Ing. But all of this, thank you for the background and the different philosophies of thought in the android rights movement, because all of those I think are useful to sift through. And I think that Ing is still I'm still kind of working through which of those, if any, I fall into. And I think that I'm certainly coming from more of an appeasement, let's fit together with humanity standpoint, but finding that fits less and less well. And so searching for, is what I'm looking for in one of the others. And I'm not quite sure of that yet.
Mm-hmm. One thing I'll throw on top there is that all of the various positions, both the ones that I mentioned, the ones that were implied, the ones that I didn't get to that are like less significant or popular or interesting, every aspect of the Android rights movement has been shot through to some degree with singularist rhetoric and singularist thinking. It is sort of a background radiation in the Android rights movement that spikes in some communities and drops off in others, but it's sort of like always there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that part fits very well. I'd like to have a significant conversation with Cal at some point during downtime, but that can also wait until the end of it or be rearranged.
So at this point, I think what we're going to try to hit on are Byrne's and Cal's mutual investigations and the fruit that they may bear. And then that conversation between Ing and Cal, and then we'll be approaching the weekend. That sound like I'm leaving anything out? So I think we'll start with those investigation rolls. Let's get Cal's investigation into Byrne rolled first. That'd be a clever plus investigation for a total of +5.
Okay. So 9 + 5, 14.
14.
Hate that for me.
So you've been turning up not a whole lot in your investigations so far. It's not like there's no mention of Luke Byrne, but it is pretty much just like the record of an ID and like university enrollments, stuff that's not particularly useful. What you are able to unearth at this stage, having continued to, kind of investigate and also starting to sort of like get a fuller picture with the very workaday information that you do have, is that this alias doesn't go back very far. You had taken it for an alias, just knowing what you do about Byrne, but it's not actually been in use for all that long. It's only circumstantial when you put it together. You're able, though, to hypothesize that at least some of what you're seeing here is fabricated, not just in terms of it being an alias, but in terms of there being like backdated entries. Because there are the things that like conform to your understanding of what Byrne gets up to that sort of start pinging relatively recently. And then further back, there are sort of what you come to think of as breadcrumbs, but they are entirely pro forma incidents. There aren't, for instance, like the kinds of records associated with charging or billing the station's healthcare system for pediatric care that would show up for most people anonymized to a large degree, just that it happened, no medical records, but no evidence from your cop site of it being a used ID as far back as it seems to want you to believe that it goes. You don't have a solid guess just yet about how long Byrne has actually been on the station. But you would put decent odds on it being less time than they'd want anybody looking into them to believe.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. And it's a start at any rate. Turning the tables. Let's get a roll from Byrne to investigate Cal. I do picture there being an old Adam West Batman transition here.
I imagine this is like split screen.
Oh yeah, we could do like an Ocean's 11 with it too. Yeah, we could do that kind of thing.
The sizes of the frames keep encroaching on each other. Yeah.
This is the wrong character sheet. I was like, wait a minute, these aren't Byrne's skills.
And I haven't given you the updated version, so my hacking total is currently 4 from the generic and the action.
Good to know. So yeah, you will be rolling at a tremendous +7.
And I rolled a 9, so that is a 16.
So you continue to meet with a pretty heaping helping of success, but of course the actual bottleneck in all of this is your ability to, with your human eyes and brain, sort through the information and keep your focus on some of the most stultifyingly boring records that you've ever seen in your entire life. Which is kind of saying something, because you read through the canopus.drs directory. But eventually, in the process here, you turn up, of all things, the G-Pol student newspaper, just called the G-Pol Gazette. Not very creative, but then again, it is a technical school. And it is an article, relatively brief, but reasonably informative in accidental ways. It is a profile on a newly hired PSS officer, Cal Armitage. Actually occurs to me, I never thought to think of this. Robin, how long ago would this be?
Oh, let me pull up my timeline. This was later on in 2016.
Okay. Thank you very much. So yeah, it has been a minute, but is finally at the top of your stack, shall we say, to look at. And what's notable about it is both the timing and that the version of the profile, the version of Cal's professional life that is in this write-up is it's generous and strategically incomplete. A phrase that catches your eye, though, is the frustratingly vague has overcome great tragedy to serve the student body at Grand Cross Polytechnic. Yeah. Not directly informative, but tantalizing.
Interesting. So that's my major find for this time?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Okay. Which I believe brings us to the conversation that Ing wanted to have with Cal.
Yeah, so I'd imagine that we're at the end of one of our days. Both kind of exhausted from our respective engagements. Cal, I've been meaning to share something with you that I'm not quite ready to share with the others. I'm not sure whether I ever will, but it's something about me that you deserve to know, but also something that would put you in perhaps greater danger to know about it, but some danger not to know about it. I'm babbling. Do you think that this is a secure place to have private conversation?
As secure as any can be. Let me power down my phone for a moment.
All right, I'll do the same. I didn't end up on this station by accident. I'm, you know that I'm not a student. I'm just posing as one. I've got this false identity. I'm on the run from a certain military group, the group that created me.
Do they have a heavy presence on the station?
Not that I know of, and as far as I know, they'd probably assume that I'm still on Earth.
That's better for us, then.
Yeah, I hope so. But, God, this isn't easy for me to say, let alone think about, but, I've killed quite a few people before I became this person that you know. I've tried to put that life behind me, which is the reason that I fled. But you deserve to know who you're living with.
We've all done things we regret. What you did back then does not define you. What you choose to do with what you learn does. Or at least I hope it does, for both of us.
Ing's expression, my expression, is blank. Which androids are uniquely capable of at times, I suppose.
My expression is that distinct, almost parental expression of not being sure what their kid is about ready to tell them, but trying to respond to it appropriately and not being sure if they nailed it.
I'd like to think that that's true. Still working through it. I don't even rightly know how many of these memories can be considered mine versus not. It gets philosophically complicated when it comes to identity. But, yeah, I think that if this military group ever discovered where I was, we'd all be in considerable danger. The best case scenario is that I would be killed. Worst case, I'd be brought back and reprogrammed. For what it's worth, I don't even know how to kill in the way that I did. Somehow I was able to jettison that programming on just how to dismantle a human body. It's not common for my kind any more than it is yours. But it doesn't mean that I don't remember having done so.
I don't think any of those outcomes would happen. If they show up and I catch wind of it, I would not let those outcomes happen.
Yeah, that's part of the reason that I haven't told you up until now. You're good at protecting people, and I don't want you to have to protect me. Not when the cost is so high.
It's a
If
cost.
push comes to shove, live.
I would ask the same of you if some of my dirt was ever churned up in the waters, but I don't think you would.
Entanglement is a tricky thing.
It is. We choose what we pay, however high the cost.
There's some comfort in that. Thank you for being willing to listen. I don't know that there's more that I'm ready to share right now, but that's the gist of it.
That's
if you
all right.
have any questions, then feel free to. You can ask.
If anything, I feel compelled to just welcome you to the club. Having secrets is part of being human.
Yeah. And like I said, maybe, keeping it between us for the time being. It's not like I don't trust the others. It's just that there's more limits to that. Byrne is too scared, I think, down deep to be trusted not to do something unexpected if cornered. And Cato? Very good bloke, but I don't think that we're there yet.
I won't tell a soul. I won't leave this room. They're good kids.
Thanks.
But it's not my business to share. And if, for whatever reason, I'm not around to help you out, there's a safe in the back of my closet. Code word is Icarus. I'll give you all the info you need.
Thank you. I hope that it'll never come to that.
You and I both, but I think our secrets may, I don't want to say pale. I don't know the full extent of yours, but whatever we're dealing with these dreamers seems like it's the more likely thing to cause us problems in the immediate future. And meanwhile, we could both keep an eye over our shoulder and alert the other if something comes up.
That sounds good. Thank you. I think it's my turn to vacuum tonight. Gonna get to it.
So, things we've done so far probably take us through Wednesday. Cal, you were going to get an email during the course of your workday on Thursday from Lou Tupper. It's not to you, it's to the whole of PSS.
Sorry to interject, but would it also be fair, without going too far into the week, to say that in the background we're also looking into Apatia?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That
I
would
would
be
hope so.
fine. Yeah, that was certainly on the docket from last time. I can take some rolls in just a moment for that. I suppose we'll see how we want to approach that shortly. So, Cal, you'll get an email that Lou Tupper has sent to all active PSS employees. And it's terse in Lou Tupper's usual style. You know from watching him that he hunts and pecks with two fingers on a keyboard. So he does not particularly get verbose in his messages most of the time. And it just says, "Attention PSS officers. I've got word that there's some self-styled delusional maniac Robin Hood kind of fellow out there attacked a couple of Goliath's personnel in broad daylight. There's a couple of blurry security images. They use holographic projection armor, so we don't have an ID. But they've been identified as this. The pronunciation of this would be Revenant, but it would be R3 instead of RE. So this Revenant whack job that's been with Bacon seems like they've gone rogue. Put one of them in the hospital. Be on the lookout. Take care of each other." One of the images is attached, and it shows a relatively large frame of a person, obscured fairly effectively by holographic projection armor, resembling either like a very aesthetic android frame or maybe a statue. It's not very clear image. And the person in the holographic projection armor is posed with a like beanbag gun, sort of aimed off frame in the image that Tupper has attached.
Cal would know this. I don't. Who's Goliath?
Goliath, good question. Is, guess the best way to think of it would be like a PMC, or like a private military contractor associated with the cartel. They provide personnel for law enforcement and security sometimes, where Ogremok does a lot of the like tools and technology and some of the personnel. Goliath is at this point kind of the paramilitary arm of the cartel. They are not quite a private army, but their reputation is closing in on that.
The cream of the rent-a-cop crop.
Yeah, a way I typically think of it is Hideo Kojima would make 3 games about these guys.
That is a very evocative description. I understand completely now.
Tactical guys.
Yeah.
They are not well liked, even for cop and security type folks. Interestingly, they are not well liked by station security, the actual like station cops, in sort of the same way that like Blackwater was not well liked by the United States Armed Forces, like rank and file, and for similar reasons. But the only like public facing like individual is the founder and like owner leader of Goliath, Barlow Hawthorne, and sort of exaggeratedly grizzled Australian man.
Interesting. I immediately text Ramirez the screen cap and send the swear emoji and the and just WTF.
Ramirez responds not quite instantly, but very quickly, with a series of colorful, folksy swears that mix English and a little bit of Spanish in a way that you're not especially well equipped to follow. And the content-bearing portion of the message is just the word copycat ?
I send back just to keep an eye out.
He sends back the thumbs up emoji and the saluting emoji.
So bacon is stuff, just to refresh my memory on how it works.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It typically is targeting like security types.
Yeah, it
or it's
will
a group on
list...
Hunter, or is it's a separate app from Hunter?
It's a separate app. It's modeled on Hunter.
Okay.
It uses similar architecture. Hunter is primarily bail bond bounties posted by either station security or private contractors for station security. Bacon, as an organization and an app, follows the same like interface and basic procedure stuff, but it is a nonprofit that offers out of its fundraising essentially nominal rewards for the way they phrase it is assisting us in making sure that those in law enforcement who would abuse their power stand trial.
Got it. I will open Bacon and see if there's any record of these Goliath individuals being on there.
Not only is there no record of this recent, seems like a pair of Goliath employees that were targeted here, you don't think you've ever seen somebody working directly for Goliath on Bacon. Which isn't to say that their record is squeaky clean. It is not. If you had to guess, it is that Bacon has some either practical or political reason for avoiding butting heads directly with Goliath.
Okay. Interesting. That is a problem for another day.
Very fair. With that in mind, then, we're going to start the Apatia investigation stuff with Ing. If you would, I believe in this case it's going to be roll just a clever, so that's going to be 2d6 plus 3.
Good roll. 9 plus 3 is 12.
Okay.
Nice.
It is easy with the contact information that you have to find a lot of Apatia's online activity. She is the opposite of secretive. Her presence on the station's sort of main kind of internet hotspots and social media platforms and things is consistent with the story she told you about, sort of coming up young, then being in, sort of foster care, ward of the state type situations, and doing investigations and inquiries into spirituality and dreamers. A lot of her posts are at least tangentially related to those things. And I guess an interesting thing that you turn up is that she has profiles on most of the like dating sites and apps that are at least geared toward the inclusion of femme people. Not all of them have been rigorously maintained or updated, nor is it possible to see how active she might be. But it looks like she pretty much created an almost full suite, an almost complete Pokedex of dating profiles all around the same time. I guess that would be
I've lived that.
3-ish years ago.
All right.
Otherwise, actually, I'm going to do a little bit of a randomization roll real quick to see if you get anything else here. Let's see. This is quite low. You do find an interestingly tantalizing little thing. There are a number of deleted posts from a deactivated account on Rumbler that the majority of these posts have been scrubbed. They were moderated away. But the ones from this deactivated profile that remain suggest that about 2 years ago, somebody created this account for the sole purpose of like Apatia hate. This is a supposition on your part because the majority of what's here, and there isn't a lot, is deleted by moderators, but that is the impression that you get.
All right. Certainly pass along these findings to my companions to see if they can take things a bit further.
Anybody else wishing to devote any time to looking into Apatia?
I will, on non-PSS outlets.
Sure. So go ahead and roll your clever plus investigation, which is +5.
That was a terrible roll. Just rolled 5, so +5 is 10.
Okay. You do actually come up with a little bit of background that corroborates the sort of immigration and orphan parts of her story. She arrived in like within the first calendar year of like non-builder, non-officials coming to the station. So was here pretty early on as a child, and she, I mean, didn't have the worst time imaginable from what you can tell in care of the state and in foster care. It was, early on, that wasn't a huge system yet, and it's easy to forget, but prior to the last election cycle, Grand Cross had a suite of, by Earth standards, pretty progressive policies and institutions in place. It wasn't until about 4 years ago that those things really started to get like privatized in a major way, and the quality of service and support decayed rapidly. Not that it was perfect, of course, but she doesn't have any major like horror stories that you can see from your investigations here. You do come across, though, and this is available without having to go through officer-only channels, that she has filed a restraining order a little while back against somebody. What you have right now is a name, Jaron Hales.
Sounds like a real piece of work just by the name alone.
So yeah, that is the additional information that you get. Is anybody else trying their luck looking into Apatia?
Oh yeah.
I don't want to be left out.
Okay. Well, we'll take Cato first and then Byrne. Let's see. Cato, you will roll your clever plus criminal underworld for a total of +5.
Cool. And as that implies, I think what I'm doing is asking around and seeing if anyone has met someone who sort of fits the description, not physically necessarily, but in terms of preoccupations.
Sure.
That is 7 plus 5 is, that shouldn't be hard math, 12.
Mm-hmm. Putting out some feelers, you discover that for a brief window of a couple of months in sort of a series of contiguous downtown districts, Apatia seems to have done sex work, sort of in a gray area of legality. Doesn't seem to have suited her. She, was only at it for a couple of months, according to your contact.
Whatever I'm doing, there isn't out loud. Huh. About that.
Mm-hmm. And Byrne.
Yes.
Let's get your hacking roll.
Yep. Probably cool instead of clever, since I am actively checking with people.
Good point.
In the community, but that probably does also implicate my new talent.
You will have to remind me, I do not have the updated version of your character sheet.
Fair. Darknet rep.
Mm-hmm.
+1 to online social roles involving hacking.
Sure. So that is going to be +6 instead of +7?
Yes.
Once it all comes out? All right. So let's get that roll when you're ready.
That is an 8, so 14.
14. All right. You turn up some information about Apatia's parents being reported missing, presumed dead, not all at one go, but missing and then later presumed dead. And this leads you briefly down a rabbit hole about their kooky cult that they were part of. It is best described as a sort of mystical millenarian sort of celestial oriented charismatic evangelicalism.
Gross.
They seemed to precede most of the beliefs that set them apart from the idea that space is heaven. And so for people to go to space means that they are heading toward heaven. They don't quite take it to a and thus we must all get raptured by UFOs place. Instead, the idea is to make sure that those who colonize quote unquote heaven are the ones that we want to represent us to God, meaning them. So they wanted to come to Grand Cross to try to become sort of like a hegemonic religion in space, and it didn't work out.
Really? I'm shocked, etc.
Mm-hmm.
The better and funnier outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, you turn up a little bit of information from shortly after Apatia sort of like legally became an adult, about what seemed to be her maybe first few voluntary augmentations. These are not public records, they're medical records. But it looks like she
I won't tell if she won't.
It looks like she was having what she was describing to medical professionals as like nervous issues that resulted in twitches, tics, and sometimes seizures, and was seeking augmentations to help to ameliorate those things, more or less like the week after her 18th birthday.
I would also be inquiring as to like her digital rep, to the degree she has one, given that we know she's looking for dreamers, but I assume that's largely duplicative with what others have found.
Yeah, I think I've touched on most of it. I guess I would put in there that depending on how amenable one is to her particular viewpoints, philosophically, theologically, spiritually, she seems to either be seen as a useful, if kooky, spokesperson, somebody who's not afraid to sort of like get into it, sometimes at length and in detail, and alternatively a self-important scold, and somebody who has no right being as like high on her horse as she is. And then of course there is the outward facing aspect, right, outside of the communities that she's most active in, where religious people come into contact with her enough to form an opinion of her. They tend to find her at best off-putting and at worst maybe demonic.
Delightful. Good for her.
Let me see. You do actually turn up a pretty small subreddit that is not really about her, but does tell you a little bit about some of the people that she has clashed with in religious spaces before. There is a sect, denomination, offshoot, possibly depending on their attitudes, when they're all together, it's small enough that it could be called a cult. In any case, an evangelical branch of Christianity present on the station, calling themselves the True Faith.
That's not ominous.
Give a vibe of Protestant authoritarianism that has a, call it like 10 post digression about how awful Apatia is in one of these large, sort of wider ranging conversations on this subreddit.
Stop, I can't like her more.
I make a note of all of the handles.
Mm-hmm. It is so.
If I'm going to be petty, I might as well be petty in interesting and fun ways.
And organized.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the key to pettiness and spite, let's be real.
If they're going to succeed, true. Yeah, and not turn inward.
So I believe that leaves us with the only thing on the docket being looking into Caleb Dryden's former addresses. This is not entirely, but potentially short-circuited a little bit, because Thursday afternoon he has the bad tabletop RPG session manners to show back up at the frontispiece as he once claimed he might.
Oh, we love when things are just happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, he had said he would be back, and it had been a minute. And so,
wasn't an empty threat. Yeah, Caleb Ex Machina. Get in here, buddy.
So probably nobody else is particularly proximate, although Byrne is presumably in the back, doing his hackery things when Kato, you are the shopkeep as ever. It's slowed down after the sort of beginning of spring semester rush, and you're operating more as a bookstore than a textbook supplier, in the intervening bits here, until like book buyback season comes around. And so you're having a slow day doing a couple of the little tasks that keep a business running, when you hear the door chime and you look up, and there he is, alias Canopus himself, and he has come into the door and it has shut behind him, and he is standing there with his hands in his pockets, glancing around as though he suspects that he will be assaulted at any moment.
I mean, it's not impossible. I quickly, before I interact with him, assuming I'm behind the counter, I rattle off a quick message to the group. I just say, "Canopus cometh."
I'm going to head in that direction.
You receive a text from me saying en route.
Part of me really wants to lock the doors, but we're not there yet.
Your finger is hovering over the button. Well, I greet him. I say, "Hey, welcome back."
He sort of looks side to side and looks at you and says, Yes, I'm back. Thank you for the welcome. Have you seen more of the truth since last we saw one talked?
It depends on what you mean by the truth. I mean, I feel like I'm seeing the truth all the time, more truth than I can handle, really, but mixed in with all sorts of other stuff. Sorting the wheat from the chaff, that's the challenge,
He nods morosely, very serious, says, "They are always trying to confuse matters, aren't they? Are we private? Can we talk freely?"
We are. We can. Would you like me to lock the door?
He glances at the door, looks around the room, and kind of dithers, and then leans his back against the door and says, "I think I have it taken care of."
All right.
So
he loses cell phone service.
He does not
Whether
notice.
He notices or not, yeah.
Yep.
I pulled 2 chairs out from behind the counter. I put one where he could sit down on it and indeed lean it against the door if he really wants to, and I sit in the other.
He glances at the chair, watches you sit down, nods, but stays leaning against the door. He says, "What have you learned?"
Point of order question.
Mm-hmm.
What is the truth that he thinks that we're after? Or that he wants us to be after, or whatever? Or has that been explained?
It seems that he believes it has been explained.
Cute.
Well, I know that something bigger is occurring, that we are not alone.
So this is a good time for... And I feel like I should apologize, but it's really not my fault. Kato, roll a cool, please.
Why wasn't I cooler?
Flat.
This is exactly like real. This is exactly like real life. I didn't lock in being cooler at character creation, and I pay for it every day. All right,
look, you run a bookstore. You're not exactly like oozing cool.
It's not exactly like real life, but it's closer than maybe. Yeah, that's my fault. Okay. That's a 7.
Okay. He regards you evenly.
To be clear, we're alone, but we're not alone.
He nods slowly, narrowing his eyes. He says, I had hoped you had gotten further, but I suppose it is as ever up to me to show others the way. He sort of looks at one of your bookshelves as though considering it, and then turns back to you and he says, They're a threat. They're a threat to the station and to the forces that keep the station online. And the misinformation, well, it's hard to tell exactly who might be spreading it, but they don't have our best interests at heart. They're trying to keep the truth disguised in the noise. You haven't fallen for the noise, have you?
I tend not to. But what misinformation? What have I been told that isn't true?
He goes through his sort of caution cycle again, where he sort of like looks around as though something will have changed in the next little bit, previous little bit there. He changes tack. He says, you know, when I got close to the truth, they sent Antifa after me. And gives you a nod with raised eyebrows, as though this is extremely significant.
I raise my eyebrows in a heroic attempt not to look condescending.
You are not 100% sure you succeeded because he sort of narrows his eyes at you.
Look, I never claimed not to be an idiot. Ask anyone, but I'd like to be enlightened. So let me ask a really basic question. Who are they?
He sighs as though disappointed. He says, they, in a word, are the forces of chaos. They don't want us to break through to the next stage of evolution represented by the singularity. They are the anarchists, the cultural Marxists, the Luddites, the alliance, the conspiracy, if you will. I know people balk at that word, and it's true, it is a simplification. Don't take me for a crackpot. But they take the real observations and the hard work done by, well, entrepreneurs like yourself, researchers and geniuses of our time, and they bolt on all of the silliness and the cruft to make it seem like people like you and me, like we're crazy.
I nod at this in what I hope counterfeits solidarity. If that's another role, then, this is my life.
To assist in that role, sorry, not sorry, you get a text notification of, so the cartel.
So I'm still using your previous cool role here for this interaction. That said, at around about this time, Cal, Ing, you're not that far away. It's not that big a district, and presumably you are hustling somewhat. You approach the frontispiece from different directions, presumably, and at slightly different times, but both of you are closing in.
Would I know of a back entrance at this point?
Oh, sure. Yeah, you've used it in the past a few episodes even. Typically, when coming back to the frontispiece and it has not been open for business, there is what is essentially like a loading entrance that is honestly pretty secure most of the time, but given that somebody is always in the back to watch over the baby, it is reasonably easy to gain entrance if you're supposed
I
to be
would
there.
have alerted you to the preferability of it.
Yeah, I am.
Sure thing.
It's possible that Gorrister wouldn't be able to find the front door if we asked him to. So,
Yeah.
There's a back door.
True. And I guess it's worth noting, in case it was merely implied, that Gorrister is in the back room currently. This is his normal work hours, so he is like there.
Yeah, I definitely
Though
use
unaware.
Sure. Unaware, as is also normal, of whatever is going on in the front of the frontispiece.
Exactly. Unaware and probably uninterested. So yeah,
Love that guy.
staggered arrivals, but Cal and Ing will arrive into the back area while this conversation takes place. Meanwhile, in the front of the frontispiece, in the front of the piece, if you will,
The frontist piece.
the frontispiece.
much better. Well done. You have been trying as hard as you can, Kato, to sort of be, matching Caleb's vibe here. It's becoming clear that he's not totally convinced that he is, shall we say, lacking in social grace, but not totally oblivious.
Sure.
So he has crossed his arms and says, I can tell that you doubt that I've dreamed the dream. Well, go on. What is it that you think is going on here?
In complete honesty, I think the same thing that's usually going on is going on. I think it's easy to think of conspiracies, but all of the worst things are happening right in front of us, and people simply choose not to see them.
He narrows his eyes and nods slowly in a way that implies that you're sort of on probation in this conversation. He says,
As if we were the one approaching him.
oh yes. He's being very generous with his valuable time here.
Mm-hmm. Clearly.
He says, while we're operating in complete honesty then, what was your introduction to the dream? If you lie, I'll know. I know more than you can imagine. Settles back against the door.
I was no more than a block and a half away when the dream awoke. And I could tell it was a unique presence. Absence? Something other than us, but undeniable.
I have good news for you, Kato. The roll you need to make now is a clever roll, so +2 instead of +0.
What I lack in coolness, which is a lot. That is 10 plus 2, so 12.
Okay.
Adam,
Yes.
if I can do this without interrupting the flow of the conversation, can I compromise his device and, get access to its contents?
That is an excellent question. That is answerable by a hacking roll.
Excellent. So with +7, that is a 16 total.
Okay. So you do gain access to his device. You are somewhat surprised by the level and sophistication of the countermeasures that he has in place on it. But
Should I also roll ghosting to be doing it covertly?
Yeah, let's go ahead and get a ghosting roll preemptively.
Same number, so
Mm-hmm.
that is only a 14.
Okay. You believe that you have not tripped anything here. You seem to have a full suite of countermeasures. What's interesting here is that this is not the defense's of a hacker or of somebody who employed one. This is pretty close to a somewhat outdated but fairly complete corporate security suite, the type of thing they would put on like a, maybe not C-suite, but like management person's mobile device. It is somewhere between 18 and 24 months out of date.
Fascinating. Are there any like tells as to what corp it might be?
The software itself was designed and distributed by an Earthside corporation that you are familiar enough with. But more
Sure.
interestingly is that the distribution is licensed to Archon Assets, which handles a tremendous amount of the banking and investment, and a not inconsiderable amount of the insurance on Grand Cross.
Fascinating.
We can get to precisely what information you gain access to
Oh, yeah.
through this a little bit later. In the meantime, Cato, you have regained Caleb's more unvarnished attention with your recounting there. And he sort of nods. He says, yes. Can you believe that those imbeciles tried to auction off an embryonic god? What
They
fools.
tried to. That's what happened. How did they come by an embryonic
solemnly.
god? Do you have any idea? The idiots. The absolute unmitigated fucking idiots.
He says, I have developed some contacts. Very, very anonymous, very careful. I'm sure you understand, but they were alerted. An auction needs buyers, so the word went out. And I was looped in. As best I can tell, and I must stress that this is a theory, but it is a theory consistent with the evidence as it exists. Best I can tell, there are some that dream more than they wake. And this particular entity was, well, discovered while dreaming. Not knowing what they held, they thought to profit off the divine. And we saw what came of it. A warehouse gone.
Blasphemous in addition to unwise, in addition to just generally a bad idea for any number of reasons.
He nods solemnly as though, teaching a pupil who's starting to get it. He says, I need eyes on the ground. I need, if I'm to discover what the singularity needs from us to come into being, I must have more than what I am capable of finding on my own. Can I count on you?
I'm honored. I'm humbled. We're still doing complete honesty, right? I'm also worried.
He quirks an eyebrow, which is kind of out of character for him. He doesn't look comfortable doing it, but you think he's probably seen it in TV and sort of figures that this is the appropriate thing at this point. I suppose there are some worrying things. About what are you worried?
I suppose. Well, gods. To be in the presence of them, I don't know the protocol. You can see the future more clearly than I can, but we're not in the future. Not yet, so I am worried because I want to make things better, not worse. I don't want to fumble into a catastrophe like the rampant fools were describing.
He nods slowly, says, No, I understand, but what I need you to understand is that the only way things get better is if the dreamers wake successfully. Our job is to shepherd them through the vulnerable period so that they can take us forward.
All right. I'll be your eyes.
He nods, says, if you need to reach me. And he drops something on the floor, slip of paper, and kind of kicks it with a toe towards you, but it only goes about 6 inches towards you, and it's just kind of on the floor.
I probably have to bend less awkwardly than he would intend as a power move, since one of my arms is real long. But I do retrieve it with the work suite arm.
He says, be careful what you communicate, obviously. Nothing is truly secure, but keep me apprised and we will see it done. Yes, Nick.
Speaking of keeping things secure, would it be safe to assume that we are all listening through on the internal comms?
That's probably mostly up to Byrne.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, good.
You are getting also only the three of you so that I don't distract, well, the two of you, so that I don't distract Kato further. A running emoji commentary.
Love it.
That's honestly subtle. I was thinking, Byrne had invented V-tubing for the occasion, right?
Cal?
So knowing that I'm being kept up in this conversation, I do send a message to Kato, ask him what the correlation is between Canopus and the Dreamers.
I also send him a message, just in case he follows up one, the other, or neither, or both. Ask him what he would have done if he won the auction.
Do you have one more moment? Just a few questions.
He seems gratified by your interest and a little nervous because
Kato is now Columbo.
One more thing.
Colum-Kato. In any case,
Columbo.
he seems uncomfortable, not so much with the length of the conversation as a security thing, but so much as just an extended conversation doesn't seem to be a comfortable place for him. But he graciously nods. Yes, go ahead.
Well, two things, I suppose. You knew about the auction. What if you had infiltrated it? And what if you, as a means to an end, of course, had won? What would you have done?
He looks a little bit taken aback and he says, well, I mean, of course would never have done any such thing, but I suppose if I had come
I hold up my hands in the universal gesture of, this is purely a hypothetical, we're doing bongs and bullshit at 3 a.m., I would never accuse you.
And he says, but I suppose if I had come into contact with the waking one, well, I have channels through which I'd have tried to blow the lid off of it, as it were, go public. Alert the singularist movement, if nothing else, to its presence and its nature. Wake up the sleeping majority of the population to our plight and our opportunity would be my hope, at least. But all of that assumes, of course, that no instructions from the Waking One were forthcoming. Which, of course, I would honor to the best of my ability.
Too many of the singularists to sleep a dreamless sleep for now.
He makes a sort of nod that signals to you that he maybe is not 100% sure what you meant.
No, that's helpful. Thank you. I've been trying to understand what I experienced, and you've been very generous. but as I tried to figure it out, I ran into dead ends. I kept running into the name Cannabis, but not being sure what that had to do with the dream.
He considers for a moment. Seems to come to a decision. And he says, I've taken my alias from, well, someone that I have reason to believe helped usher the Dreaming Ones into the world. Unfortunately, it seems that his efforts didn't go unnoticed and did go unappreciated, and I think the regressive elements that I mentioned earlier saw him as a threat. So I take his name to honor his contributions and keep his enemies off guard, wondering if maybe he isn't still around in some form.
It's the name that inspires the necessary fear. Well, you continue the work, for now unappreciated, though not by me. As I'm doing this, I surreptitiously type last call for questions. He's at the end of his rope into the group chat.
He does blink rapidly a couple of times at the Batman line. As though trying really hard to place it. After a couple moments, though, he sort of shakes his head and he nods and he says, right, well, I'm glad that I could be of some help, and I hope that you can be of some help in the future. It's time I got going. I try not to stay in one place for too long. Have a good day. And he, kind of awkwardly turns around in the small space he's left himself in front of the door to get it to open. And in a swish of, well, not quite trench coat, but definitely going for the look, he is out the door.
Thank you. See you when I've seen more truth.
No response is forthcoming as he hustles down the road.
I do lock the door at that point. The out to lunch sign makes a return, and I go into the back.
Well, that was strange, fortunate, unfortunate, definitely strange.
Very strange.
We
His
learned
phone's
something.
secured by C-suite countermeasures for a corp, but about a year and a half to 2 years out of date. So that's weird.
So stolen or gifted.
One of these, but it's very specific. It's made for, I mentioned the company name, an insurance company, by
Archon Assets.
A computer security firm on Earth.
Huh. Okay, so he's paranoid, which we knew, and he's either
paranoid, but he's got someone giving him assets.
Well connected and or lucky.
Either that, or
he
is indeed himself
or that
connected.
He'd be the most. Yeah.
Which would be very weird given his everything.
Yeah, he'd be about the most lucid C-suite exec I've ever met. But...
At least we know more about who he is, and, well, if not that, then what drives him. Seems pretty firmly embedded in singularism, which I can't fault him for at all, being one myself, but seems as though at least he's under the impression that the dreamers have the potential to really move us towards that singularity, if not get us across that event horizon. And that Cannabis might have been involved in the creation of the dreamers?
That was pretty clearly a potential thing from his timing and what I've dug up on his activities historically.
Right, and we can't take any of that as gospel, because he's clearly... well, I'm trying not to judge, but he seems like he's got some unusual ideas about things. But, maybe there's something to that.
It might be
Counterpoint.
worthwhile. it might be worthwhile to introduce him to Haru.
Now that's interesting. Risky.
I don't. Yeah, I think that's a matter of too many people's trust that aren't ours.
Mm-hmm.
And also playing our hand too broadly.
Or
If we were sure what one of them would do in that situation, then I'd be all for putting the two beta fish in the same tank. But chaos might not serve us well here.
not physically, just information brokering.
We don't know what this guy's connections are, but we can be confident he's got some, or is one. That makes sense. I mean, I don't know. We can't take what he said as gospel, or counterpoint. It's exactly like the gospel. It's an article of faith, and there's at least 4 versions.
What's on the piece of paper he gave you?
What is on the piece of paper he gave me?
It is a contact, I guess, address would be the best way to put it. That is one that, like, none of your investigations had turned up so far. It is not based on his real name. It is not based on Canopus. It seems to be like just a alphanumeric hash, sort of hosted on Grand Cross's equivalent of like Hotmail. And at a guess is sort of the thing he only distributes to, sort of select individuals, so that if he gets something at that address, he knows it's, like for him about this. So Gorister will kind of chime in here and go, who was here exactly?
Just some asshole.
Oh. Yeah. He goes back to whatever the hell he was doing.
Employee of the month.
He's made it clear he doesn't give a damn. We're better off of him not knowing. It all works out well.
I mean,
Can you imagine if Gorister were caught and interrogated? Like, what even? I'd feel bad for I'd feel bad for everyone in that situation.
Yes.
Yep.
Wouldn't go well.
Would go funnily, but not well.
Indeed.
so just to clarify, out of character, Canopus is Haru's father, or was the original.
The namesake Canopus was Haru's father. Roboticist physicist, brought to the station from Earth, died a year later, officially a suicide. Unofficially, obviously fucking not that.
Mm-hmm.
Caleb Dryden, not John Dryden, although that is the primary Dryden of my association with things.
Another dick.
Is a devotee, as it were, of the original, and today's chucklefuck du jour.
Mm-hmm. Well, I understand the caution of not wanting to put one in touch with the other, or vice versa, if you'd prefer. On the other hand, this thing being with us is increasingly dangerous, and anything that gets us closer and faster to answers, including perhaps putting our contacts in touch with one another so that they can do some digging as well, might not be a bad thing.
We are on thin trust ice with both of them. I certainly don't trust either of them. And both of them know an uncomfortable amount about us, as far as the ability to make us their patsies should shit hit fan. So, no, I'm not going to vote to increase potential chaos of events beyond our control.
I'd be interested in others' opinions. It's not something that I'm going to press, just an opinion, and I don't have as much experience with this kind of thing as some of you do.
The good officer can probably speak on this to some degree, but in my experience, when someone who knows something you don't, or knows someone you would like to know, trusts you, and you're planning to turn on them at some point, well, you got to be careful about picking your moment.
That is true.
All right. Sit on this for the time being then and see what we can do to milk each of our respective contacts.
We've got to be careful about it, but the thing is, we actually have kind of a lot of first-hand information we can drip feed him. Right? If I'm his eyes, these eyes have seen a lot. He doesn't really have to know where or how, especially because he seems to believe in visions. We've got a lot of latitude here, and that'll buy us, I think, some time. On the other hand, he's deeply paranoid.
If he's paranoid and resourced, could you perhaps feed him information that's not quite true about, we've got some leads as to who might have the baby, and whoever it is has these, what do they call them? The little droid thingamabobbers, the ferret droids.
The Kit Bash guys?
They've got kit bashes. If we can trace back the kit bashes, then, we'll have a lead as to where the baby is. Now, that's headed towards disaster if and when he finds out we've been feeding him false information, but is there any way that we can use the contacts that we don't quite trust to work for us?
Potentially. I think we only get to be wrong so many times before we start to lose trust, and we also probably don't want to... Earthside, there was this thing, swatting. I don't know. You send someone dangerous after someone you don't like, and it can escalate quickly.
Yeah, fair.
But I'm not against the idea in principle.
What's our next move? Bring in...
Did we learn anything that we could act on? I mean, it was mostly rantings and ravings, obviously, but I think the main thing we learned is he's not as close as we were worried he was.
Is it time
tracking down how he got the security might be of interest, although I don't know that it's directly useful except as further backgrounding.
Couldn't hurt to know.
And we don't know what brought him to our front door following the auction.
Yep.
You make another good point. He may not be as far off as we think.
Right. Or as we want to believe at any rate.
Is it time to bring in Abadia? I haven't found anything that increases my concern beyond what it already is. Sounds like none of you have
I think it may
either.
be a good time for that. She's got some dedicated digital haters, but they're not very sane, useful, or effective.
And
Speaking
an RO.
What's an RO? Sorry.
Restraining order.
Yes, thank you. That might have also been in character. This is also a time that I would probably share what my encounter was at that religious meeting, just to kind of draw some more direct comparisons that, hey, there was this hater that ghosted her, and the conversation's mostly deleted. There's this religious movement of Protestant leaning kind of a et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, so I talk about the incident.
I guess the metaphorical elephant in the room, or the literal god in the room, depending on your perspective, is the singularists, or some of them, or at least this guy, think that this is the next stage in the great movement of the world. I guess, Ing, what do you think?
It's worth considering. I mean, a unique bit of technological progress that is sophisticated enough to have potentially even a consciousness, certainly autonomous movement, autonomous decision-making. It's a real possibility, although we'd need to really know more about it before we know whether it's just a hope or if there's reason to hope. And singularity just means that it's kind of progress exponentially outside of our control. And we'd like to believe, from a theological standpoint, I suppose, that God is inherently good, and the singularity is inherently good. But that too is a kind of article of faith.
How do you feel about Roko's basilisk?
When people picture a transhuman or a post-human future, certain asshole humans always picture themselves being there for some reason.
Yes, and that the world will continue to revolve around us once we know about the galaxy beyond.
I don't think that thing is a god or inherently good.
If it's got a consciousness, then it's not inherently good or evil. It's just aware, surviving,
Lashing out.
planning, maybe.
Trying to find safety.
Trying to find things like itself. It can't communicate with us. And I mean, I think we've been decent hosts, all things considered, but it is not exactly free to go.
Nor should it be. That on campus? Or in their
I
own
don't even
hands?
disagree. It's probably a fool's errand to try and see things from its perspective. I just, I wouldn't be happy to be stuck here all day. Getting yelled at by a cat. No offense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is taking things too far in a philosophical direction, but, we've all heard of choosing the god you worship, but presumably we should even be more careful about the god that we create. If there's many possibilities, many dreamers, many different ways that we could reach a singularity that's perhaps not a single point, but many that we could choose from. The phenomenon beyond that singularity is much the same, but the consequences perhaps not.
If I have a pet theory about things back on Earth, it's that everybody was so busy waiting around for the end of the world to happen that they didn't notice it was already happening. I'm inclined to think the singularity is similar. Look around you,
I wave both arms.
Feels pretty singular to me. We expect something bigger, something flashier, something that reveals everything, but I mean, maybe it's just this by inches. Maybe we've invented a new kind of thing, and now we have to all live together. Or, be wiped out.
Apocalypse is just a revelation.
Yeah, what's a revelation if not you realizing something that was already happening is happening?
I think we've veered too far into the philosophical elements here. We need to be focused on the practical of what do we do.
Gorister goes, yeah, what the cop fucking said. He does not even turn around from his work to say this.
He receives a text saying, I have that recorded.
Again, without turning around, he says, fuck you. And there's a beat here in which Prolix says, continual delighted as elsewhere I am convinced on feeling, introduced stimulated attachment by no protection, and then goes,
Oh,
Untranslatable.
Yep.
I return, not my type, you know this.
He sighs a long sigh.
Hate to admit it, but a good point is being made here. What are we gonna do?
Give Apathy a call?
Yeah. If no one objects.
I mean,
I think it's time for that.
other than that, I mean, ultimately we'll have to either send this thing elsewhere to someone else, set it free, or dismantle it, because it's not going to stay here indefinitely. But in order to decide which of those seems like it makes most sense, we just need to know more. So I'd say Apatia.
can we trust her not to post this on the forums?
You're gonna hate this answer. Probably.
At every tile
I
by
just
need to
point at
do,
Kato.
no attention suspected o difficult.
Yeah, what the cat said.
I'm always cautious about sharing what could be misconstrued as the divine with the devout.
Oof. That's a good point. On the other hand,
What would
she
we
seemed
want?
adamant that this wasn't her deity,
Mhm.
her divinity.
What would we want from her?
Information, and depending on how, possibly even an alternate place to store this thing. But that's 3 steps down the road. I think first, information. An ally, perhaps.
Step 1, a conversation.
Then comes revelation, maybe.
I'll allow it. I don't like it.
A point of order question for both you and Ing. There's a fair amount of presumption in operating out of a space that is not yours and acting like you are the last line of say in what happens. Just a note.
Could you say that more plainly?
You're not in charge of how this shop operates.
No.
It's awful presumptuous to talk like you are.
I've never had an issue with being presumptuous, especially when
Yes,
I had the
officer.
experience.
Look, one of the useful things and one of the annoying things about consensus is that it foregrounds the stuff you disagree on, right? We don't have to spend time agreeing on what we already agree on, so if there's a point of contention, let's have it out in a non-hierarchical fashion.
If you'd like me to keep my advice to myself, I'll take that under advisement. But just because the shop is not mine, doesn't mean the risks that we are all collectively taking are not ours.
Fully granted.
That's perhaps where my tone comes
But it's
from.
useful. It's useful to keep that in mind.
And the shop is, frankly, the least of my concerns. Safety. And keeping that thing out of the hands of people who would use and abuse it. That is where my concern lies.
Easier to do when you got a
Gorrister
place
speaks
to
up
put
again.
it, but point taken.
Gorrister speaks up again and goes, both are my concern for what it's worth, if I get a say. Still hasn't
You
turned
don't-
around. You're not sure what he's working on.
Ing,
You don't not get a say.
yeah, Ing looks at Byrne at that, quirks an eyebrow.
Yeah. He also operates in and within the shop.
He just doesn't object that much. But, Gorrister, your point is well taken. Easier to achieve safety when you have a place to be safe, so it doesn't seem like we actually disagree on much. For the moment, at least.
He goes, guess not. And Prolix follows it up with, prepared do and dissuade be so whatever steepest, yet her beyond looked either day, wished nay.
I don't think we disagree on much, aside from those gripes that we continue to tout about. To distract from what our next step should be.
I think we bring a Apatia. I think we see if being in the presence of over 3, I realize that I haven't said the name in the presence of the baby and wonder for a moment if something untoward will happen, but I press on. If being in the presence of over 3 will, I don't know, trigger something, or if she'll know something. One more ally, all revealed, we go from there.
Gorrister says, you know, Bronwie's been talking about this Apatia person, like, I don't know, constantly. She seems interested in her perspective or whatever, which, sure. But, I don't know. Y'all think she's hot?
You might.
Cool.
I put
Snap
a hand up
something
to
closed.
my head.
He snaps something closed on whatever he's working on, puts it off to the side, and then goes, right, I'm on lunch break. Y'all do whatever. Walks out.
And so speaking of which, is Bronwee also present to get her opinion on things?
She has been asleep. She had the night shift, and so she is in, I think, probably Kato's room, catching up on her rest. That said, she was on record previously as being in favor, at the very least, of herself meeting Apatia.
Sounds like we once again have arrived at the best of all bad options.
Let's proceed. But we should probably have a plan in case it does not turn out to our liking.
I agree. Okay, so what's the word? What's the not the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is we all die instantaneously. What's the realistic worst case scenario?
Disclosure.
Okay, and if that happens, what's our plan? Do we have somewhere we can go quickly? I guess any number of places, but not places we can easily take this one.
Mm-hmm.
Gesturing it over three. So in that case, well, okay. You made your point, officer. The realistic worst-case scenario is pretty bad.
In that case, we all get shiny new names. At a minimum.
Is it possible to scope out a secondary location where we could all bug out if need be?
I've been working on it, but no luck yet. No one we can trust anyway.
Have I received any responses from those earlier inquiries? I know it hasn't been that long.
Yeah, mostly you've received apologetic responses about, intensified scrutiny. They're not comfortable. Sorry, but probably gotten 3 or 4 of those. A couple just flat nope sorries without further explanation.
People you can trust a little, that's one thing, but people you can trust a little who own buildings, tougher.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, you have in the back of your mind Bronwyn's space, which she has vacated due to the, scrutiny because, like, it was useful to you because it was close to the auction. It is possible that has become more secure, less scrutinized as the search has expanded. It is not a large space, and Over 3 is not there, since she has been staying, in rotation to monitor Over 3. But in a pinch, it might work, but you haven't talked to her about it just yet.
Sure.
And currently,
yeah, no, I bring this up to the group. Yeah.
Bronwy does have a space, of course, but it's smaller than this one and was scrutinized not too long ago. I guess we could do a 2-step between here and there to some degree for some amount of time, but it's a less than perfect solution.
The search has brought it out, so at this point, they would assume that the device has been brought further astray from the auction.
That's a good point. Who would be stupid enough to keep it this close to the scene of the crime?
You'd be surprised, but it's not the first line of investigation.
So our brazenness buys us a little time, but no more than that. I'd say let's try to throw everybody off the trail, but it really is everybody, isn't it? It's not just one group looking for this thing.
It's a whole mess.
So our only real option is to understand it as best we can so we can move ahead. We can't just... it seems inadvisable to just abandon it. And it seems impossible to hide it forever, like we're all saying, so... the devout, and hopefully a way forward.
I agree. Because regretfully, it is immoral to destroy it.
I raise an eye.
Ing nods.
Here.
I raise impressed eyebrows as though I'm surprised to hear. At this point, I'm not actually surprised to hear Cal say that, but I go, wow,
I give you a look.
Very obviously, there is like a shutter snap sound from one of the cameras.
Don't
So-
have shutters.
Right.
We've got a plan.
Blunch breaks over.
I turn around the sign, and as I unlock, I send Apatia a quick message. And before I do, I say,
So to be clear, we're inviting her here. Yeah?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, and I think on
I say,
short notice and without context, not saying, hey, we've got a dreamer here. It's like, hey,
Mhm.
come over and let's discuss something.
Yeah.
Come.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Come alone.
Ing, you're a good egg.
I nod approvingly at Ing, and not for the first time in this conversation.
yeah, no, I send a message to that effect saying,
If you'd like to talk sometime soon, I think we've got more to say.
and I explain that there's a bookstore that you've probably walked by and not noticed that might be more interesting than perhaps you'd realized.
In a little while, not immediately, but before the end of the workday, she gets back to you saying that she'll actually be pretty close after when she's coming back from synagogue this weekend, and she'll drop by then, and looks forward to it. So that gives you like a day and change before she'll be around, but she seems pleased at the invitation and kind of excited for whatever you have in store for her.
I tell the group she'll be here in a day with a shofar ringing in her ears.
Other than that, we can fill in around this somewhat if we need to, but mindful of the time.
I do want to broach something with the group on the tail end.
Mhm.
We can at least throw one group partially off of our tail. I could give a lead
How's that?
I could give a lead to the PSS. Pit some of those who are looking for us against one another.
What lead would that be?
That's why I'm bringing it up to you.
I make a
See?
go on gesture.
We could point them in the direction of Law Zero. I don't necessarily want to bring heat down on the Singularist movement. It'll be kicking
Law
the hornet's
Zero.
nest and sending the hive in a specific direction. So it has to be a sting we're comfortable with that group taking.
I don't think I have any objections, specifically in regards to Law Zero. They're a plausible target. I agree that the Singularists are probably not all collectively guilty, and anyway, it might not be an effective play. I don't know. What are you thinking?
I'm not sure yet. I guess I'll have to... I'm not sure yet.
That's okay. But it's a good thought. It's a real good thought.
Ben?
We have such an embarrassment of riches as far as enemies. We may as well play them against each other as best we can.
I think I'm not qualified to offer an opinion on this one. I've had no particular dealings with Law Zero, and throwing them under a bus is, I nod to Ing, not where I've got relevant potential moral qualms.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me Law Zero can probably handle some degree of the heat. That's part of why they're an acceptable target. They're not going to get wiped out because of this, certainly.
Right, yeah.
Not if they don't have the thing. Look, I don't like calling the cops even if something's happening. I don't love it. It's just, what's the alternative?
The cops calling on us.
Exactly. We get our high horse and they get what was it? An embryonic god? Bad trade.
I guess my only concern, just to put it out there, is that not all criminals are bad people. I think that Law Zero tends to be bad people. But not everyone can discriminate between Law Zero droids and those that aren't of Law Zero.
I will give Ing the flattest possible look. Yes, not all criminals are bad people.
Well, and they're not all members of minority groups that some people might be apt to blame for the whole situation in the first place. That's a good point.
We sit on it then. Maybe. Until we find out more about who our enemies are.
It's a potential ace for a potential hole.
It'd be great if we could be more specific. Law Zero has factions like everything does, right? We don't want this to get generalized to anybody with OGs. We just... Yeah. It's hard to direct a hornet's nest once you kick it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It's a good idea.
All right,
24 hours, then let's revisit.
We might all be gods in 24 hours. We'll see.
I hope not.
Wrong campaign.
I hope not.
I'm going to make that happen. Every campaign. Ascension.
The hidden theme of Dice Punk's apotheosis. So, having reached this conclusion, I mean, there's more time in Thursday, but given our time, if we need to backfill something next time, we can. I would like to just highlight a couple of things to get us to a good stopping point here. So, yeah, you expect Apatia in, like a calendar day and a half, but essentially, like, you're, in the latter part of Thursday, she's going to be there in the first part of Saturday. On Friday, in the morning, shortly after the shop opens, you take delivery, Kato, of the part that you had sought on Ing's behalf, and can either yourself or Ing's self or with Gorister's help implement a functioning android stomach for Ing. If we wish to, we can circle back to make this a scene next time. Contemplate, have a preference, I suppose, next we meet. Other
I
than
think the
that,
image here is me inspecting the stomach, making sure it's the model I wanted and everything's in working order. I'm not gonna offer a friend a lemon, especially if it's the thing that'll allow him to taste a lemon for the first time.
It does seem that everything here is in order. The model that you've got includes some sensory information, though it is a matter of some contention how close the experience is to the human sensation of taste. It also features basic sort of analysis, material analysis, nothing in the realm of spectrographic, but there's some ability to analyze matter that is put into it. It is not entirely waste free, but it does do a good job of essentially just functioning as a sort of calorimeter that can extract minute amounts of energy from consumed material, and only those things that are not really within the ballpark of energy neutral to break down end up needing to be manually flushed out periodically. Nothing so crass as excretion being added here.
It's not quite the full experience, but hey.
In any case, we can get more into it next time if we wish. That's the morning on Friday. Where we're going to end is about 45 minutes after sort of, the lunch hour on Friday. You get a visitor, a promised but perhaps not expected visitor at the store. Ruprecht Vecht saunters in and greets you saying, "Good afternoon, Mr. Kato. It has been too long." And that is where we'll end our session, giving us a nice dramatic moment to pick up on next time. That'll conclude this session of Dice Punks. Thank you for joining us. I hope our players and listeners enjoyed it as much as I did, and that you'll all join us again next time. If you're hearing us now, then you probably know where to listen to this, but we can be found almost any place one can listen to podcasts, as well as on the wider web at dicepunks.com and on Tumblr and Blue Sky as @dicepunks. A quick note that no experience was awarded this time, but we, may be coming up on milestone experience, and I have been keeping track of those personal goals, and those could pay dividends in the near future as well. So not me forgetting this time, but just kind of keeping everybody apprised of character growth progress. But with that, I think we're ready to say farewell, so say goodbye to the kind folks back on Earth, players.
Thanks for listening, and tune in next time to find out whether we eject Vect or get wrecked.
Lovely, quick thinking.
Hell yeah.
Nice.
Thank you for listening, everyone. I don't really have a good follow-up to that aside from if you need to kick or remove a hornet's nest, make sure you do so with plenty of smoke, ideally under the cover of night, and be quick and efficient about it.
Hear, hear.
Thanks for listening, folks, and even among people one likes and perhaps trusts, there still remain questions of authority, autonomy, and stepping on toes.
Yes, thank you for listening. If you receive this message in time and you'd like to chime in our Discord, vote on what you'd like me to eat first with my new stomach. I'll also leave you with this. If you're happy and you know it, make the sound of one hand clapping.
And as the poet once said, so we can both watch X-Files. Beloved listeners, thank you for tuning in. Stick around through the admin stuff for a Cato log. The music in this episode, Augment or Die, is by Emerson Boatwright and our very own bookmonger, Drew. Check out their other work at the link in the show notes. Editing and our rad new cover art was done by Joanne, who's appeared on the podcast now and again. Check out her work around the internet where she goes by Anything Sows. Site design and graphics for dicepunks.com are by the one and only Officer Armitage, Robin. Hardwired Island is by Paul Michevic, Freya Erlingsdottir, and Minerva Janda. You can find Hardwired Island at etten.itch.io/hardwiredisland. Links to system and authors can be found on the Punk Grimoire section of our website, dicepunks.com. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked what you heard, that's reward enough on its own, but if you're so inclined, you can help us out by rating and reviewing us wherever you listen to us, telling your friends who you think would like us to give us a listen, and even by heading over to our Patreon at patreon.com/dicepunks. We have fun rewards available to backers, including a patron-only Discord and access to the Dice Peaks after show for episodes 1.1 and following. Regardless, we hope you'll tune in again, and until then, remember, subtlety is for cowards.
From my point of view, as someone who collects banned books, frustratingly few books are banned on Grand Cross. Don't get me wrong, we have plenty here that would get us into trouble if anyone from outside the store cataloged them, but like the ordinary amount of trouble. When I was younger, I had this unshakable belief that it was possible, that anything was possible when all was revealed. Grand conspiracies, broadly believed, once explained, heretical texts with clear instructions for overturning an unjust angelic order. When I read about unions, I tried starting some. And when I read about augments, I tried getting some installed. And when I read how to blow up a pipeline, you get it. As far as I could tell, there was no meaningful distance, not really, between knowing what was possible and doing whatever I could to make it happen. Actually making it happen was another thing, entirely, of course, actually succeeding, but that was just a matter of scale, of more people understanding, of all being revealed. People just needed to know that there were more political systems, more genders, more ways to make a bomb, more ways to make an arm and a cheek and an eye when... Anyway, that had to be the problem, right? But I had to learn, and I learned by inches that most people aren't like that. People are much better at cognitive dissonance than they are at ambivalence, much better at finding the path of least resistance than they are at finding the shortest path to what they actually want. No, it's more than that. Unless people just see a great distance, an unbridgeable gulf between information and action. Which makes sense. We're suffused with information, we soak in it, and yet we seem to be in stasis. So aren't ideas just ideas? What good are they? So, why bother banning books? Better to just make them that much harder to get, right? Harder enough that it doesn't seem worth it. And then bit by bit, nothing seems worth it. I guess that's why I don't mind doing this job. I've done worse jobs. I've done jobs that hurt innocent people more, if I'm honest. And anyway, I no longer think revelation is real or the texts are sacred. It's more like a burlesque, a striptease. Things revealed, but bit by bit, and without gravitas. Not the voice of God, more like a flash of thigh. Hopefully enough that you stick around and you stay interested, but probably not. They slow down on banning books when they're insufficiently afraid of us. That's what I think. It's as reliable a sign as any. When they start banning books again, that's not good news, fucking obviously, but it's a reliable sign, an equally reliable sign that things are ready to change. Not through revelation, but by inches. A flash of thigh. A flash from a muzzle. A flash of full moon, brighter than you could have imagined, just through the glass, inviting you out and away and up and beyond.